Welcome to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, where our goal is to give some practical encouragement and thoughts for leading your team in your local church. I'm thankful today to share. My name is Tim Price, and I want to share about 4 ways that we might be able to trust our team more.
My name is Elizabeth West, and I want to welcome you to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast, where our mission is to equip and encourage worship leaders and teams and practical components of local church worship. We're so thrilled to have you listening to our podcast, and our prayer is that it will be helpful to you and your teams. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to reach out to us at worshipleadertoolbox.com. We'd also be honored if you would subscribe and share it with others. Heading now to today's episode.
Of the many things you do as a local church worship leader, one of them is to equip the congregation to become part of your team and to grow in leadership. You won't be in your role forever at your church. I've said it several times on this podcast. Everybody is interim. Even if you stay there for 15 or 20 years, you're eventually going to move on. And though you want to use your music skills and your leadership to serve well, one of the best things you can do during your time at your church is to have a heart for God and to help encourage and grow the gifts of those who gather around you. For starters, with this idea of trusting your team more, it's difficult to lead a worship ministry on your own. You have to become comfortable recruiting and inviting and getting people on board to help you sing and play and make sure there is tech to support it. And most worship leaders who have served in any kind of music realize that this is pretty obvious. In fact, the music world is one place that people really understand the value and the benefit of serving together as a team. The sport team world is another one. You can't play on your own for certain sports. But we have to get comfortable reaching out to people and involving them. This could probably be a whole different post, but there are so many different ways to make that happen. In my life, most often when I meet new people around our church, one of the first things I ask them is if they enjoy music or if they like music or if they're part of a worship team or anything like that. And often we'll get people who respond and take part. Just last week, we had a drummer who played with us for the first time ever. He also helps with sound, and he wound up getting involved because of sitting around at a church meeting and just asking the question, "Are you involved in music?" And the response started a conversation. I'm confident that if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in a position of being part of a worship leadership team in a local church, and you probably have people around you who serve. And so now you need to take the next step. You need to begin to equip them for leadership. Drilling down a little bit, this is kind of a messy process. It's sometimes hard to describe how to equip because so much of how people equip is based on their own style and personality. There are some things, I guess I should say, that are important. Documentation, expectations, cheerleading, all kinds of different ways that people get their teams involved. But it does come down to your style and pulling people in. If you have a very, very small team, it's probably all going to be on your shoulders to personally connect, to have coffee, to go eat lunch, to meet with people at the church, play some music with them, see where they're at. It's probably all going to be centered around you for quite a while. If your team and as your team grows, then there might be others involved in this process. But you have to have a plan for equipping and pulling people in. But here is one aspect to this whole thing once you get people around you. And what I want to talk about today is that we need to trust our team more. The first step to inviting people into leadership is to trust them more. It really can be a little scary. It can be a little nerve-wracking. You can have Sundays that don't seem like they click exactly like you would like them to, but it is a process and an investment that is going to help the kingdom in the long run. It's also going to help you in the long run because you're not going to have to try to figure out how to do every little thing all the time. The truth is, you can't. You have to trust your people. And often, their gifts are going to grow, and they're going to learn what they love and how they can do it best. And I've also learned that as I invite people and trust them more to serve, as I take a backseat role for that Sunday, or as I'm gone altogether, then they really are able to step up. So here are 4 areas just to get your thoughts going about how you might trust your team members more. Number 1, leading songs. I know this is a little bit difficult for a worship podcast because some people already have 3 or 4 or 8 worship leaders on your team, and you've already been to this point a long time ago. But there may be some of you listening today who sing every song every Sunday. One of the ways you can trust is you can trust one of your vocalists to lead a song. If you're always the one that takes the reins and picks the key for yourself and jumps in, then change that around for this week. Share the music leadership as much as you can. You probably will have to change some keys, female and male keys, or based on the range of a vocalist. Share the song files and the links with them in advance. All that takes a little bit of time, but it is worth it. As your team members become comfortable leading songs, not only does it engage the congregation on a different level, help people have a different kind of sense of worship, hear from a different voice, but also, have you thought about this? If you have a vocalist who learns to lead 4, 5, or 6 songs every time you lead those songs, at some point you have a person who could lead a whole set. Leading songs shapes worship, it shapes your team, and it's an invitation to take a step toward trusting your people more. Here's the second big area, planning the list. You can help others learn to plan the list, the songs, and you can trust them to do it. And other aspects of the service as well. When someone else is leading the worship service, invite them to start from the ground up. Send them the scripture or the theme, let them pray over some songs, and let them give it a try. Of course, we'll assist them and we'll offer ideas, and we work in partnership as much as possible as we're growing the leadership of our team. And even when people are trusted well, we still want to collaborate. But we have to trust people to experience the process and make it work for themselves as they learn to grow in leadership. The fourth big area is leading the service. Trust others to take the service and lead it. The more often you do this, the better and easier it will get. In fact, if you get into this rhythm with other people leading as worship leaders, you can, as I mentioned before, take a backseat role, play another instrument, or help with tech, or just be present in worship. Then when the time comes for you to have an off Sunday or a vacation or transition to a new role altogether, you have people who can keep carrying the ball forward. The best way for others on your team to learn this aspect of worship leadership is to just get thrown into it with some quipping and some cheerleading and some tools given to them, and then just do it. Share the joy and responsibility with others for leading the service. I've been forced into that role over these years, and at times we have more people than others, but over the years as a part-time staff person on our church, and my other role pulling me away some Sundays, primarily during the summer, there have been opportunities for people to step in and lead. And I've always kind of joked that the best way to raise worship leaders is just to be gone. And of course, you can't abdicate your role and just throw it on other people. I also know that it's harder to be gone on a Sunday than it is to be there. If I'm there, I crank out some songs and everything works well. If I'm not there, I really, really have to have all the I's dotted and T's crossed so that those who are leading the service feel successful. But we want to trust our people, and one of the big things to trust them with is to begin to lead. And then one fourth one that might be a little simpler overall, but that is to trust your people to pray aloud. At times, personally, I find myself getting into the rut of being the resident prayer. And lately, I kind of go through seasons where I'm like, I need to invite others in. So we don't want to embarrass our team or, call people out, but check in with people beforehand. Would you be willing to pray before our circle, before worship today? And maybe just your small team. Or could you pray after this song on Sunday? Inviting others, equipping them, and then trusting them to pray aloud for worship is really going to help grow the confidence of the team. And, again, the voice that the congregation is hearing. Not always the same person and same style of prayer. If you don't feel like you have leaders that you can trust in these 4 areas, if you don't feel like you have people around you one of the things you as the worship leader need to do is start praying now. I recently heard a great quote. I think it was from Craig Rochelle. He said, "You don't find great leaders, you build them." There is someone in your church or in your sphere of influence who you can invite to join you in ministry and become a partner to serve in leadership. Pray for doors to be opened and people to respond. And here's one last closing thing, and that is that trusting your team more will require more work on your part. And maybe not tons of work forever. Eventually, it will help you. But at the beginning, you will have to do a little bit more. As the old adage goes, it probably seems easier just to do it yourself. But that is not how the church is built. You are called to help equip your people for leadership. And the first step is to trust them more. I want to thank you for listening to the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast. And if there's any way that we can be helpful to you, I would love to visit with you and just be a part, hear about your ministry. You can visit our website, worshipleadertoolbox.com. And I would also like to encourage you to make sure that you share this podcast and visit our Facebook community page, worshipleadertoolbox.com/community. One other thing that I'd like to share, and that is that if you're listening to this podcast as we are recording it for the fall of 2022, and you're a worship leader in our area around St. Louis, Southern Illinois, I'd like to invite you to come to the Ministry Leadership Conference, where we're going to have several different people from the ministry staff roles of churches, from hospitality to worship tech, to student ministry, people who lead in the local church and help pull together teams. We're going to get together. We have a day planned of focus sessions and general sessions. And if you would like to find out more about that, you can just visit our website, harvestconferences.org. We'd love to have you be a part of that. Thanks again for listening today. And we are praying for you and your ministry and your leadership that you can continue to trust your people more.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Worship Leader Toolbox podcast. We're praying for you and for all our listeners as we keep making an impact in the lives of worship leaders and worship teams around the globe. Before you go, we'd also like to let you know that we have 2 other podcasts through our ministry. One focused on ministry leadership is called Go Harvest, and the second one is a weekly 5-minute devotion called Faithful Friday. You can find out more at harvestministryteams.com/podcast or go to the link in the show notes.